My name is Shane Linder. I am a pastor. I am a pastoral family counselor. I provide psycho-spiritual counseling. And I am going to talk about why I use the term or the title pastor. I have had a couple of Adventist pastors ask me why I call myself a pastor or use the title pastor when I'm not an ordained Adventist pastor. And that's a pretty legitimate question. And so I have put this video together, and it is unlisted on YouTube, so that means it's not open to the public. The only people that can see this video are people that I send a link to see this video. So it's not out there for a lot of people to see. And I'm going to go through each of the areas that address this issue so that I think it'll be well understood why I use that title. I'm not a full-time pastor, but as we know, many congregational churches do not have full-time pastors that are, such as a lot of the Pentecostals and these different churches that they're kind of like an island all to themselves. They're not part of a big denomination like the Seventh-day Adventist denomination or the Church of Latter-day Saints or the Catholic Church, where these are very large organizations. A lot of the congregational churches have pastors that have other jobs. I knew a pastor that was a janitor. I knew a pastor that was a roofer. The roofer owned his own business, and that's what he did for a living, was roofing. And every Sunday he was in church where he was the pastor of that church, and he was ordained he went to Bible school and went to Bible seminary and became an ordained minister, but they didn't pay him enough for him to make a living doing it, so he started his roofing business. That's similar to my ministry, and we will get into this as we get into this video, and I think that anyone watching this video will have a completely good understanding of why I use the title pastor. Okay? So what is a pastoral counselor? Well, a pastoral counselor is a recognized religious practitioner in the state of Texas, permitted to practice marriage and family therapy in a manner consistent with the laws of the state. Here we see the Occupations Code, Title 3, Subtitle 1, Chapter 502, which is for marriage and family therapists, Subchapter A. In the application of this chapter, I have it highlighted there. It says this chapter does not apply to, and then if you jump down to paragraph number 4, it says the activities and services of recognized religious practitioner, including a pastoral counselor. So, and then further down it says that if the practitioner practices marriage and family therapy in a manner consistent with the laws of the state. So basically what that means is as long as this pastoral counselor is practicing marriage and family therapy as a licensed professional counselor, that we're not doing anything strange, like cultish activities. If in the counseling practice we were to have, some type of sexual things that were incestuous or, just way out over the line, or if it was cultish things, where we were butchering chickens and spraying the blood on people that we're counseling, if we're just doing, outrageous things like that, then the state can step in and say, hey, you cannot call yourself a counselor. You can't market yourself as a family therapist, but as long as the pastoral counselor is practicing marriage and family therapy within the boundaries of what is considered to be marriage and family therapy, then they're not subject to this Department of Health, and that's what this code is. This is the Occupations Code. This code here is basically saying who needs to get licensed, and if you are a licensed professional counselor, which is the initials are LPC, then you have to be licensed by the Department of Health in order to practice as an LPC. Now, there are some disadvantages to that. For example, an LPC has to be very careful about talking about religion, about praying. If LPCs are allowed to use the Bible and are allowed to pray with their clients, but most of them that do that will have the client sign a waiver giving them permission to use the Bible and to pray with them, because it is against the law for a licensed professional counselor to proselytize. They are not supposed to push their religion or use their counseling practice to evangelize. Their counseling practice is considered mental health therapy, not a religious therapy. And so they can lose their license. So if somebody goes in there that is, say, not a Christian, and the licensed professional counselor starts telling them about Jesus Christ and that they need to accept Jesus Christ into their life, and that client goes and reports them to the Texas Department of Health, the LPC can lose their license. If the LPC gets somebody that is gay in there and tells them that homosexuality is a sin, they can lose their license for that. So there are restrictions placed upon the LPCs, those licensed counselors by the state. And so Christian counselors, some are Christian counselors and they are also LPCs. They've gotten their license with the state. But then when a client comes in, they have to have that client sign a piece of paper saying, I understand that I am receiving Christian therapy, so that client cannot later go and turn them into the state of Texas, to the Department of Health, and get their license removed. So it's a issue. It's an iffy thing. Now, I am not a licensed professional counselor. One of the big reasons for that is because I went back to graduate school in my late 40s, and I was already well established in the construction business. My salary is significant, and for me, if I were to go become a licensed professional counselor, I have to go through the internship and everything. I would be earning about half as much money doing that. It would be a tremendous pay cut, and I'm supporting a family and kids in college, and I cannot stop my professional life and cut my salary in half to become an LPC. And then even after I get my license as an LPC, LPCs make about $20,000 less a year than what I'm making in the construction business. So, it's not a path that I'm going to go. My ministry is a counseling ministry. I accept donations. The organization that I started, it's a family organization. It is a nonprofit organization registered with the state of Texas, and we are tax exempt through the IRS. We are a legitimate nonprofit, and I am a legitimate pastoral counselor. Well, what does it take to become a pastoral counselor? What type of education? Because this is one of the things is people say, pastors have to go to school to become a pastor. Well, certainly Adventist pastors do. Some of these Congregationalist churches, they go to a 2-year Bible study and wind up getting ordained and going out and becoming a pastor someplace. So, within the Seventh-day Adventist tradition, our pastors are well educated. A master's in divinity from Andrews University is a 78 credit program. It's a 2-year program that includes summers. A thesis is not required. A thesis is optional. Okay, so that's what it takes to become a pastor. I know that with a bachelor's degree you can be a pastor for a while, but most conferences, after a few years are going to push a pastor to get their master's of divinity. Okay, now at Andrews they also offer a master's of art in clinical mental health counseling. It is a 60 credit program. It is a 2-year program, and there is no thesis required. So, just looking at the programs that Andrews University offers, that's if you're going to be a pastor, you're going to get a master's of divinity. If you're going to be a counselor, you get a master's in clinical mental health counseling. Okay. By the way, I did do some undergraduate work at Andrews University, so I am familiar with Andrews University. I did not get my bachelor's degree from there. I did study when I was at Andrews University. I was studying construction management. They had a construction management program there at the time. I transferred out because I had some financial issues there, and I went back to the college I was studying from, which was in Minnesota, Minnesota State University, and I got my degree in construction management there. Graduate school. Okay, master's in family counseling at the Universidad de Montemorelos is 90 credits. Montemorelos is the Adventist University in Mexico. It really is a combination of Andrews and Loma Linda University combined. Montemorelos has our seminary there, just like Andrews does. It also has the medical school, like Loma Linda does. It has a very prestigious hospital. A lot of politicians and famous actors and so forth go to the hospital in Montemorelos. They have doctors there from all over the world. I live on the border in South Texas, and I go to Mexico. It's only, the international bridge is 12 miles from my house. I go to Mexico for my medical work. I have for over 20 years. And when people find out that I went to the Montemorelos, most of the medical community, although we are 3 hours away from the university here where I live, most of the people in the medical community, they know of Montemorelos. It's almost like the Mayo Clinic in the United States. It's one of the most famous hospitals in Mexico. Well, it's a 90 credit program there, so it's more credit than what is required for the Masters of Divinity, and 50% more credits than what Andrews University requires for their counseling master's degree. This is a 3-year program, unlike the 2-year program for the Masters in Divinity and the 2-year program for the counseling at Andrews University. And a thesis is required at this university. And this is where I got my master's degree. So my master's degree is from an Adventist university. It was a 3-year program, 90 credits, and a thesis required. Of course, because my undergraduate degree was not in psychology, I had to take prerequisites. Very much like if somebody wants to be a pastor and goes to Andrews University to get their master's degree in divinity, if they did not get a bachelor's degree in theology, they're going to have to take prerequisites. That's exactly the case with me. I had to take prerequisites in order to get my master's degree in family counseling. Why don't you get ordained as an Adventist pastor? This is a question that some people ask. Why wouldn't that make you more legitimate? And it's almost like people think that I am acting as an imposter by using the term pastor. Well, the Adventist Church ordains church pastors, and they ordain chaplains, and they ordain evangelists. The Adventist Church does not ordain Christian counselors. I cannot be ordained as a pastor by the Adventist Church simply because they do not ordain Christian counselors. It is not an option for me. I did take the course for the Family Ministries local church leaders course, which I got the certification on that. But it's a nice little program. Okay, the family ministries department was very good at putting this together, and it gives some of the local church leaders some tools to help people. Okay, but honestly, I'm going to be honest, everything that I learned in this program that they put on is taught in one single class at Montemorelos. In fact, one class covered everything in this course, and the class actually covered a little bit more than this course did. So it's all good, and to me it was like an echo. you learn something at Montemorelos, and then you take this course and you learn the same stuff. And so it's like saying, hey, it kind of confirms what I learned. This is legitimate. This is good practice. And I think it's a very good step forward that the Adventist Church is doing in doing this, because we have some severe counseling needs and we just don't have enough people to do them. It would be nice to give people some more tools than what this program here offers, but people only have so much time to donate to continuing education. So this is a good start. I did get this in 2019, and like I say, it's something there that shows that I am somewhat connected to the church, although I am not an ordained pastor from the Adventist Church. My pastoral ordination is from a Universal Life Church. It provides legal credentials. It provides no theological credentials. Okay, so I could marry somebody if I wanted to. Now, would I ever perform a marriage and marry two people? Well, not if they're Adventists. If two Adventists wanted to get married and they came to me to ask if I would marry them, I would refer them to the church with few exceptions. And when I say few exceptions, I mean like if my daughter asks me to marry her, I would probably marry my daughter and her husband, but very few exceptions. I am very involved in a recovery organization that, helps alcoholics and drug addicts and codependents and so forth. And so I am very involved with non-Adventists. And a lot of my ministry deals with non-Adventists. And so if non-Adventists approached me and wanted me to marry them, I would perform a marriage ceremony for non-Adventists. I would have no problem doing that. The biggest reason I got this credential is not so that I could perform wedding ceremonies. It's so that if the Texas Department of Health contacts me, because I'm advertising myself as a counselor, as a family therapist, that I can show them that I am ordained. I am an ordained minister. And so I am not practicing as a professional counselor, but rather I'm practicing as a pastoral counselor. And the word professional is like the key word that the Texas Department of Health looks at. I cannot market myself as a professional counselor. I must market myself as a pastoral counselor, or I can use the term specialized counselor. I can say I'm a family counselor, but the word professional is the word that the Texas Department of Health reserves for those that are licensed by the Texas Department of Health. But this here basically shows the Texas Department of Health that what I'm doing is a spiritual thing. It's a religious thing. And this will be exactly what they're looking for. And I already had somebody from the Texas Department of Health go over my website, and everything looks good. Spirit of Prophecy is used as a textbook in Montemorelos. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people that are not familiar with the program, and I would say that most people, probably 99% of the people in the Adventist Church, if not 99.9% of the people in the Adventist Church, do not know what goes on at La Universidad de Montemorelos, and as far as their counseling program goes. Basically, they teach us psychological concepts, just like we would get at a public university. So we use textbooks that are published by secular authors. We use information from the APA, the American Psychological Association, and we learn about different pathologies. We learn about different disorders. We learn the symptoms of those disorders, and we learn the treatment for those disorders. Then after we learn this material from a secular, from a non-religious perspective, we go into the Bible and we go into the Spirit of Prophecy. and we read what the Bible has to say about it, what the Spirit of prophecy has to say about it. So if we are studying, let's just take an easy one for sake of conversation. If we are studying depression, then we would learn everything secularly that we know about depression, and then the treatment of depression. And then we would go into the Bible, and they would tell us to find Bible characters that were suffering depression. So we might look at Elijah, or we might look at Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi. And then they say, what in the Bible story indicates that they're suffering depression? And we have to tie this back to what we learned from the secular sources of information about the diagnosis of a depression. And then what did they do about their depression? How did they work through their depression? And then again, we have to tie that to therapy that we find, either secular therapy, non-religious therapy, or therapy that we find in the Spirit of prophecy. We do that with lots and lots of pathologies. Also, family life, divorce, parenting. We spent a lot of time on parenting, and there's 4 types of parenting as defined by secular psychology. Ellen White defines 3 types. The 4th that she does not define, which secular psychology does, is neglect. And you can argue that neglect is not a form of parenting because the parent is neglecting the child. They're not doing anything. Basically, you've got authoritarian, which is very strict, overbearing parenting. You've got authoritative, which is more democratic parenting, where the parent is the authority and maintains himself as the authority, but they are open to negotiation, and they give the child reasons why they have to obey and reasons why there's rules, and it's the authoritative parenting is the best type of parenting. And then you also have permissive parenting. Well, Ellen White talks about authoritative, authoritarian, and permissive parenting. And she does not talk about neglect like the secular ones do. But that's, examples of what's going on in this program is a lot of theology is being taught alongside of psychology. We spent a lot of time in these 2 books, Mind, Character, and Personality, Volume 1 and Volume 2. It was in the character development class that they offer. You go through both of these volumes, every single chapter. You have a test. You are tested on every chapter. You have to read every chapter, and these are pretty big books. You have to read every chapter, and you have to do a report on every chapter. And they have a bunch of questions that you have to answer. So it's required reading, and then you have to fill out a report. And then after that, you have to take a test, and you're tested on it. It was a very vigorous class. And so we got well educated on those 2 books there, Mind, Character, and Personality. And it was in the character development class. They have a Christian worldview class. 90 credits, there was a lot in there. And so it was really developing a person to be a pastoral counselor. A pastoral counselor is a pastor, but it's a specialized pastor. If we were to compare it to doctors, you have heart surgeons and you have brain surgeons. They're both doctors, but they operate in different fields. A church pastor is operating in a different field than a pastoral counselor. Many church pastors have been known to misguide couples that are having marriage problems. And many church pastors will simply refer them to a marriage counselor. Because counseling is a specialty within the pastoral ministry. And so I am a pastor, but a very specialized pastor. I am not a church pastor, nor will I ever be a church pastor, but I am a pastoral counselor. Being a pastor is really about being a servant. It is contrast to some of the other titles that are given to members of clergy, like a sage or a reverend. The term pastor is to be more of a humble title, a servant title. It is more of a Protestant tradition, to whereas we see Jesus as the suffering servant. We see that Jesus came to serve and not to, dictate. So that is the type of title that the pastor is, and that is how I use the term pastor. I'm here to serve. Being a pastor is not an elevated title. Now, at some point I may earn my PhD. That is the direction I'm going to. And being called doctor is more of an elevated position. But once I earn my PhD, I intend to still use the term pastor, the title pastor. And that I will probably have the initials PhD after my name so that people know my qualifications. But the term pastor is the humble title, the title of a servant. And that is my reasoning. And I think having seen this video, I think I've made the case that I am a pastor. I am not a Seventh-day Adventist pastor, but that is not an option for me. May God bless.